Hi, my name is Keith Cooper and this video is a review of the Epson ET-8550 printer, and this is an A3 Plus printer, so 13-inch width. It will print sheet sizes up to 13-inch by 19-inch, which is A3 Plus, and it will do longer sheets as well and all kinds of other sizes as well. In the video I'm going to be looking at different aspects of how the printer works, how it performs, the results you get from it. Do have a look at the timeline I've added to the video description so you can jump to parts that are perhaps of more interest to you, because I appreciate that there's a lot to cover and a lot of these things may not be of interest to some people, but there may be some particular aspects. So have a look at that, jump through to the relevant part of the video where it is. There's also a written article which has more technical details. There's info about that in the description of the video, so with a link through to there on the Northlight Images site. And I have done lots of other videos looking at specific aspects of making prints. So some of these prints here, I've got specific ones looking at, say for example, extra long prints like that. But anyway, let's dive into it and see what the printer is. Well, you can see the thing itself. What's special about this printer? It's the inks. I said special, it's different. It's certainly different from any other printer I've looked at. Now, I've reviewed printers for years. I don't tend to go much smaller than this. And I do printers up to large format size, so 44-inch, even 60-inch printers I've done. I can get a 24-inch printer in this space for it and have done some in the past. So if you're interested in larger format printers, have a look on the Northlight Images website, because that's where all my reviews there. They predate me making videos. But anyway, as I said, the inks. This has ink tanks in it. Now these, I can see the levels, physically see the levels of ink in the different tanks here at the front, and the ink comes in bottles. Now there's 70 ml of ink in each bottle. From filling, you will get some left over which you can use to top off. Now during the initialization process, and I have another video that looks at, and an article looking at initializing and setting up this printer. During that process you load up the inks, do some test prints, ink gets loaded into the print heads and the ink levels go down a bit. I've found that there's more than enough in these to top off the tanks afterwards. However, when I say topping off the tanks like this, I can physically see the levels here, and I could see them on my computer. If I look at the printer driver, I could see the ink levels. The printer has no way of actually measuring what the ink level is here. It knows when it's full, and it knows how much ink it's used in printing and the occasional cleaning or anything else that you've done, borderless print, overspray. It knows how much ink has gone through the print head, and it uses that to calculate what it thinks the level is. And that means that if I was to top up this one here, and this is the magenta ink, so that one there, if I was to top that ink up and you access the inks through here, there's top up points underneath this little panel. If I was to top that up, the printer would have no way of knowing I've done that. So if you top it up, make sure to go through the procedure on the screen here to say that you've filled up a particular ink. You don't want to be running out of ink. Doesn't do inkjet printers any good to run out of ink. And you know how much ink is there, you're not wasting any. So you can use this little bit left. This isn't waste ink or anything. This can go back into the printer there. Whilst talking about inks, the print head here, which obviously moves it back and forth to do the printing, has a little blue tab on it. That's the printer lock, printer head lock. If you're going to be transporting the printer, moving it much, anywhere where it could get shaken, moved much, lock this before switching off. There is a procedure it mentions on the screen here, and it's got written all over the place reminders to lock this before moving. And that is important because of the way the inks work, with the amount of ink you've got in these tanks here. If you tipped it up or moved it like that, you could get ink, could drain out, and you could get ink come out. It could get inside the printer, or worse still, it could drip out the bottom somewhere, which you don't really want. Now this printer also has, and I'll just mention it because I've got it open here, a small maintenance cart that goes here. It flips out, comes out, small cart. It gets partly filled when you initialize the printer, and it gets occasionally filled from overspray and from cleanings. It should last quite a long while, so I wouldn't recommend rushing out and having a spare ready. You're going to get a lot of print out of these inks here. There's quite a lot of inks here. You've got 6 inks, and that's wise. Now, whilst I mention the inks, one other unusual feature of this printer, and this is one of the reasons I was interested to have a look at it, because I wanted to see, could I get good quality pictures? Now, this does all kinds of office functions as well, all kinds of other stuff, which I'm frankly not interested in, and I'm not going to go into. You can read the specs and the blurb for the printer if you're interested in its performance as an office printer. But it does work well. But with these inks, I've got the normal cyan, magenta, yellow inks. That's great. They're colours, they're coloured dyes. There's a grey ink as well, which is a diluted black, which can be used to improve the tonality in your prints, and it's used for gradations to give smoother look to a print. So it's a useful thing. Also comes in with black and white, but I'm getting ahead of myself now. We've got photo black ink, which is normal dye black ink. We also have a pigment black ink. Now the pigment black ink, the 2 blacks, they're both black. Why have 2 blacks? Well, it depends on the paper surface you're using. Pigment ink, for example, works straight. If I've got copier paper in this cart at the front here, if I've got paper there and I just want to print documents, black text, pigment ink works well on those. Pigment black works well on some art papers. But if I were to try and use pigment ink on some photo papers, there's always a possibility it would rub off. And you have dye-based inks. Now, pigment ink-based printers themselves have a matte black and a photo black, which are 2 different types of pigment. In this one, this is not the same as having a photo black and a matte black. You have got a pigment black and a dye black. Now, I'll come back to this when I look at print quality and print colour management and all other aspects of how prints look and how the printer performs. But suffice to say, this makes quite a difference and makes this printer different in performance from purely dye-based or purely pigment-based inks. That reflects on paper choices, it reflects on profiling, on setup, all kinds of things. What it means is that done well, I can get some very nice looking prints. Done badly, I can get some pretty awful looking prints. It's all about how you set things up, and needs a bit of care, mainly picking the right sorts of papers and the right settings for printing. But I'll come back to that a bit later, getting ahead of myself there. Whilst I've got this open, it doesn't stop printing if you lift it to see the print. I wouldn't normally suggest running like that, but that's the main top of the printer. Put that back. The actual lid lifts up and we've got a scanner, and I'll come back to scanning in a bit because that's potentially quite useful as well, and I have used it for some testing. But there we go, that's the inks. Now the printer has several different ways of getting media through it. The most obvious one, as I've got it set up here, is the rear feed here, and that folds in there, comes back out and sets up. There we go. That's what I've used for almost all of these prints. In fact, looking around, yes, I've used that for all of these prints, including these 2 long ones. Obviously, where I've got it set up here, the long sheets wouldn't fit. You need a bit of space to be able, so you do need a bit of space at the back for using that, so with larger sheets of paper. A3 Plus goes through easily. You can even put a few sheets in. I had no feed problems with the printer at all through the back here. It works fine. Other paper inputs. Now we've got at the front here a cassette, which I've got A4 copier paper in. That is where you would load stuff for normal document printing. It's quite good. It works well. There's a duplexer unit, so you can print double-sided. Now, it says in the specs you can put photo paper here. Now, the photo papers I tried were better quality ones and were a bit too thick, perhaps, for this. They really did not like going through the duplexer unit at the back, which, remember, it's got to take the paper in going this direction, reverse it to come out the other direction under the print head and come out here. It really didn't like it. So I would say office printing, great. Photo printing, maybe if you've got thin sheet photo paper. Double-sided, yeah, maybe it will do that as well, but I certainly wouldn't want to waste much paper trying it. One other thing we've got here is a CD tray. You could load the CD in that, feed that in the slot here, takes a CD in, it will print it, out it comes, and there you go. Make sure you've got printable CDs or DVDs though, because non-printable ones, or some types, the ink won't dry properly, and the moment you pick the thing up it will smudge off on your fingers, just the way they work with that. But I say those are the two main paper feeds. There's the small paper feed here. Now this one is for small photo paper. Now the photo paper I tried, once again, was just a bit too thick for this. It went in and it stayed somewhere in the mechanism in the back here. Now fortunately you can take the duplexer unit out the back and it's easy to fix jams and the likes. But so that's also for small paper. It says 6x4, 10x15 centimetres, so it's small like that. You can get thin paper that should work okay for this, but it's not something I'd normally use. I prefer feeding things in through this slot here. It's what I do with almost every other printer. The feed here, this is great for document printing. I would not likely use it at all. Let's put the card in there properly, and that goes. I would not use it for that. There is one other feed available, and that is if I take, I'm not going to turn this around and show it, but there's a video showing how to do this. This is the straight through feed path at the back for printing things like board. So I have, this is on Epson A3 Plus enhanced matte board. It is solid. This won't feed, this needs a straight through feed path. This goes in the back, has come through, come out the front, and has printed just fine. Now, according to Epson's specifications, it should handle media up to 2 meters long. However, I have been unable to find any suppliers of 13-inch by 6-foot board that will go through this. If somebody can find me some, I'll see whether it goes through the printer okay. But I think probably not. But yeah, really useful that on the occasional print. Now, once again, I've printed that. It's Epson enhanced matte is the surface there, so I've treated it as if I were just printing on ordinary matte paper. So there's your paper feeds, couple here, one there, one at the back. All seem to work, but do be careful though with you trying to use thicker papers through this feed at the front here, because they're reversing through the duplex unit. The display here is actually asking me what paper is set in the cartridge here, on the cassette, and it helps, I find, to set the paper type here just as an extra reminder of what you're using, even if you're feeding it in through the top here, to set it here, the size and the type, and it's just like a double check when you're printing that you've got the right sort. It should print fine otherwise, you don't necessarily need to do it, but certainly if you're printing directly from here, this needs to be set with the particular type. So anyway, coming to the various controls for it, the screen is a, let's go back to there, it's been asking me for paper types, which, as I say, always set your paper types. I've got several options here, and it does all kinds of fancy printing options, you know, calendars, multi-photo layouts, all kinds of stuff you can do directly. You can use it as a copier, so with the scanner on top you can just put something in and copy straight through onto copier paper here. It'll do colour as well, does depend on the media obviously. Obviously copier paper is not going to give you great colour reproduction, but you can do it, you can use it for quick copies. The touchscreen here works well, no problems in using it. One thing I would say about the controls is that, and I'm not going to demo this, is that I can load these up on my phone. This is iPhone SE 20, I believe. There's an Epson control panel I can use, and I can do almost all the functions I can do here from the phone. You can even use it for setup. Well, that's interesting. I tested it, it works, but the only actual use I found for it was when I was sitting in the other room, remembering that I'd left the printer switched on and using this to switch it off. So yeah, about as well, maybe you can find uses for it. I would say in regard to mobile phones though, in terms of photos, you can print directly from your phone to here, but the problem with phones is they're not colour managed. The whole infrastructure around handling phone pictures is not conducive to the best quality images. What I would do if I want to print something, if I got a nice photo with this and I want to make a print of it, and I should be able to make prints this size off this phone. If I've got that, I would take the image from there, put it through the computer, have a look at it, set up all my printing controls and everything then, and print from the computer. Great for printing snaps. If you're not bothered about precise colour or anything like that, then use your phone. But if you want to get good quality prints from your phone, go via a computer. They're on the way, but they're not there yet. Same goes for tablets and the like. Your opinions may differ on the utility of phones for this. I'm more bothered about the image quality than that, but whatever. Now, in the controls I've got here, there's also other stuff. I should mention these. There are tons of Office type and consumer type functions. So I can print, these were some prints I did the other day. So I can print multiple pictures in an album. I can put stripes around it. I can print calendars. I can print to-do lists and all things. This is all the sort of stuff you expect from an all-in-one style home printer. And this, if that's what you want, this will do that fine. Now, I don't have precise timings of how quickly it prints or any of stuff like that. I can't even tell you how many prints you'll get for ink fill because I do such varied testing. I don't necessarily get meaningful results in that respect. So you get a lot of printing from it, but you're going to have to wait until more people have done more precise testing on this to get an actual realistic idea of what sort of numbers of prints you're going to get from your ink, whether photo prints or ordinary printing. But, you know, it works very well. Now, I covered connecting this up in the video I did about setup, and there's also an article on the site about setup. Basically, I've got USB or Ethernet connection at the back, or this is currently set to use wireless, and the setup was very easy. You can use, as I said, you can do it via a phone if need be. There's a simple instructions for it. It sets up really easy. It found when I configured the computer, it found the printer, set the connection up. So this is sitting there on wireless. I can connect to it directly from a phone, or I can connect as it would here. The phone is on the network. This is on the network. The phone goes through the network to talk to this. Just depends how you want to set things up. Some other items are that you have at the front here a USB socket, that's a PIC bridge one, and an SD card socket. Now you can, if you put any memory device here, if you plug a card in or a memory stick in here, this will act as a server on your network. So I put memory stick here, and on my laptop suddenly I noticed a new server appeared, and this memory stick was mounted as a device on my network. So I could transfer files from the laptop to this memory stick here. I can print from the memory stick. I can scan from here to the memory. There are all kinds of ways you can do it. Think of it as attachable storage. I've not looked at how fast it is or anything like that, but it's an option you can use. If you use memory sticks for moving things around, there's an option for it. That works on my Macs, and it also works on PCs as well, where it will appear as a server, and there you've got stuff for it. So let's cover the basics of the physical side of the printer, getting paper into it and things like that. What about getting good results from your printing? Well, first up, colour management. It's an essential aspect of getting good quality prints out. It's getting prints that hopefully match to a large extent what you see on your screen and produces pictures that you like. Now, I've got lots of other videos looking at aspects of printing, and I won't go into the detailed setup of print dialogues and things like that. But as part of my testing, I make a lot of custom profiles. Now, these custom profiles, they'll be listed in the written article, and they are available if you email me at the Northlight site saying precisely which ones you want of the ones I've got, because the profiles are only relevant to particular papers. You can't mix and match profiles. You can't say, well, this profile is of a similar sort of paper, so I'll use that. Now, the Epson software, when it installs the driver and everything, actually installs quite a few profiles for Epson papers, and they're generally very good. Now, I make profiles by printing test sheets like this. As you can see, they've got lots of coloured patches on them. I read those coloured patches using some fancy equipment. It processes the numbers, does the maths, and out comes an ICC printer profile. This is what you use to make ICC printer profiles. It's the sort of thing that anyone who makes printer profiles will use something similar to this. They may not use sheets as large as this, but that's just because I can and I've got the equipment for it. Once I've got a colour profile, I use that in my printing software. Now, I've used in quite a lot of the examples Epson Print Layout. The Epson Print Layout software is free. It's excellent software, does what it says on the tin. It handles print layout. So you take an image. Now, I can feed an image to it directly from Photoshop, or it works standalone. You can load images. You can do multiple shots. You can do all kinds of different options with it as well. But the important bit is it allows you to select your profiles. Now, this is for colour printing. I'll come to black and white in a minute because there are some important differences there. But anyway, I've made all these profiles, and one of the first things I always do anyway in testing a profile on any paper is do a test print. Now, the test print here, this top half of the image here, is available on the Northlight Images website. I've got articles about how to use these test images and things and what to look for in them. But basically the idea is that if you've got a new paper and you've got a profile for it, the first thing you should print with that should be a test image, not one of your own photos, because one of your own photos could have all kinds of other things in it. It has an emotional attachment, it means something to you, you have a feeling you know what it should look like. Go for a test image, not your image. The faults here, the reason there are lots of little bits of picture in this, they all show different potential faults. Now, I also include a version of this, and for larger paper, let's say the normal thing will fit on an A4, I include one of my pictures here because I know the tones and colours in this particular image are tricky to reproduce. Now, I've printed this hundreds of times, so I know what it should look like in different paper, with different papers and different styles of printing. Remember that the difference you get from using different papers, profiling is not aiming to make them all look the same. Profiling is aiming to give you the best results for that particular paper with your particular ink and printer. So just because you're using profiles, you shouldn't expect prints to look the same on different papers. They won't. This is quite a warm paper. This is quite a cool paper, so I can see differences here. I'm not sure how clear these will be in the video, but I can see differences here in the tone, and that comes from the paper as much as anything. So when you're picking papers, do think about the tone as well. Now, I'll come back to picking papers later on, but the key bit is that you need profiles for them. Now, good paper suppliers will often supply profiles. Now, I'm hoping that paper suppliers will see the opportunity for this printer and start producing profiles for it. If they don't, then some other paper suppliers, several in the UK I know of, will, if you buy a pack of paper, they will send you a test target, a smaller version of this, that you print out, send back to them, and they will send you a custom profile. That's the absolute best way of getting things done. You get a custom profile for your printer, your inks, whatever, and that's sorted for that. So that's colour management. It's very important in getting good results, because colour management, if you think, well, hang on, I've got a profile for a particular paper, but on a different printer, no good, I'm afraid. I mentioned earlier on the key difference between the black ink that you have here, a pigment black and a dye-based black. They make a difference in profiling and in final results. I can see it in some of these, and I'll look at that in a bit more detail when I round off later with looking at choosing papers. But there's an aspect for that. Now to black and white. For black and white printing, I have a test image that I've created years ago. It's been downloaded thousands and thousands of times. I know a lot of people use it, and I use it. There are different versions of it. There are articles describing. I've got a video also describing how to use this test image. Suffice to say, it is an image that tests your black and white printing. This is an A4 version of it. There are other sizes available as well, and other versions of it as well. You print this using exactly the same method that you're going to print your black and white pictures in. You then look at this and it shows you the quality of black and white. Now, if you're printing black and white on this printer, use the ABW or black and white or advanced black and white mode in your printer driver. You'll see options for colour and for black and white. Now, the black and white mode does not use printer profiles. The black and white mode is set up specifically for optimizing the uses of the inks for the paper. Now, when you're printing on this particular printer, you've got a number of different paper options. So if I'm thinking of just matte papers, I've got typically two options. One is the Epson Enhanced Matte setting, I think, Epson Matte setting, and the other one is Velvet Fine Art. Now, the difference between those two settings, and I won't go into the details here, I will have this on the website, all the graphs and things, is that the VFA setting, Velvet Fine Art setting, seems to use a mix of pigment and dye inks. Now, that's quite important because that's an unusual mix, and the results of that depend very much on the paper that you're using. Now, what I would say is when you're looking at printing black and white, get your paper, make a test image using the ABW mode. If it's a photo paper, then use one of the photo paper modes. This particular picture up here, it's a black and white picture, that's done on Epson luster paper. So that is using just the dye-based ink. This one here is made on a watercolour style paper, but there isn't a watercolour paper option in the media settings. There's just the Velvet Fine Art, the VFA setting. This is using the VFA setting, and with this particular one you get very good blacks and you get a nice even tonality. Now, why does this make a difference with black and white? Why should you test it? Because if you get two seemingly quite similar papers, and I'm thinking of art papers like this, I tested two. One was an Epson hot press bright, which is a cotton rag paper, smooth finish, bright white. That looks good. I then printed, that was using the test image here, I then printed the same test image on an oldish Hahnemuhle fine art paper, a cotton rag paper, slightly rougher finish. Superficially, I would have thought both were very much the same, but because of the mix of inks here, the surface coating that's being used makes a critical difference. Now, there's no way of knowing in advance which sort of paper you've got. For colour, and I'll show you this a bit later with the with paper settings. For colour, the Hahnemuhle one and the Epson one both produce good profiles and produce good colour results. However, in using the black and white mode, when I tried printing on the Hahnemuhle paper, all the blacks were crunched up, there was a slight colour tone to it. That particular paper, and I know it's a good paper, that paper really doesn't like this mix of inks. So what I would say is that if somebody says to you, I've got particular paper, it's an excellent paper, you should try that. If they've not tried it on this printer, then test before you buy large amounts of it, because you could quite easily get a paper that just simply doesn't suit the available ink settings you've got here. So that's a little bit about colour management for black and white. I'll come back to a bit more on this, about a question I've been asked a lot, which is about choosing paper, which I've got later on in the video. What about some special media? Well, I've mentioned board. This prints as Epson matte. So this is using the Epson matte setting. I've got a profile for that. The Epson profile itself works very well, so there's no problem there. It's an Epson paper, it's supported. So that's no problem. But I've also printed on canvas. Now, canvas. Here is the profiling sheet I made for it. Gives you an idea. This is a matte artist canvas, and that gives you an idea of the sort of colour range I'm getting. Now, for this particular type of, I might well think, if I was using it, I might well think of coating it or spraying it to get an extra bit of vibrancy. But in the test here, the colours look good. And there's a video about using canvas. Here's where I've used Epson print layout to do a reflected edge, soft reflected edge. So this has been produced for stretching over an A4 stretcher. These are using A3 plus sheets of canvas. If you can't find A3 plus sheets, you can get a 13-inch roll of canvas, trim it to size. As before, when making, say, large prints like this, make sure you cut the edge off properly square, because that really does make a difference. So there we go, we've got canvas and we've got board printing. Other sort of specials would be the large prints here. These are just made from roll paper, cut to length, treated as normal paper. So printed with a profile, for relevant profile for it. This one here is on a luster paper. This one here is on an art paper. They print normally. The only thing is you need to be a bit careful when they come out, and also obviously feeding them in at the other end for it. Colour management, really important in getting good results. A few more things about that this printer does. I mentioned earlier it has a scanner on the top. Well, normally you might think of using that for just copying documents, maybe copying a photo through to here to scan something onto the here, or directly onto your computer. I looked at the scanner, and I used a colour checker SD card to make a custom scanner profile. Now, you don't need to go through stuff like this. The Epson scan software is fairly good if you turn off all its corrections and colour management and things. So it does nothing, so you just get the file out of it. It's good. I used ViewScan software, which is something I've used for years. It supports literally thousands of different printers, and it's a really good bit of software. I use it because I hate seeing an old scanner going to waste just because the driver's not been supported. I believe that was one of the inspirations for Ed Hamrick, the guy who wrote ViewScan, who continues to maintain it. Excellent value. I don't know anyone who's ever had a word to say against it. It's not expensive, but the Epson software is free and it works. Now, I made a profile, which is the same way as you make profiles for papers. You can profile scanners by scanning some colours there. But the reason I did it was because I had some watercolour artwork. Now, I've got another video which I'll be producing shortly to show some more aspects of this, and that includes some stuff on colour management as well. But it was to print greetings cards. Now, this is a paper, this one is a card, and this is from Photospeed in the UK. This is a heavyish art paper. The paper, this size, it's A4, there are lots of other sizes. It comes pre-creased, so once you've printed it, you can crease it. Bit of text that's nice and clear on there, and that is a reproduction of a watercolour. And so if you're interested in reproducing artwork for cards, have a look at the other video, should be up fairly soon. And that has details about the process I went through in both scanning the artwork, which is larger than this, it's a larger artwork, and reproducing it to get the colour right. But suffice to say, that looks nice enough that a friend of mine who did the original artwork had a couple of dozen of these, as which I think people will probably be getting for Christmas. But there you go, it works very well. It's not a high-end scanner. Don't think you're going to get absolutely tremendous results from this. I noticed a bit of shading on it. Nothing I couldn't correct easily in Photoshop. But if you're going to be scanning artwork a lot, invest in a proper scanner. Something like the Epson ET-8550 I tried a few years ago. Superb. That does transparencies as well and other things as well. But certainly if you want to scan photos and that, the better scanner you can get, the better. I was pleased how good this one was, and certainly it was good enough for doing that. Now to one of the questions I've been asked most often by people when they knew I was testing this printer, because it takes a while to do this, and I've produced a few other videos on the way during my testing, is how do I choose papers? Well, first of all, test any paper you want to choose. If it's an Epson paper, it should print okay. There should be no problem in printing an Epson paper. Now, the media setting that is available, this as a consumer level printer has far fewer media settings than a larger printer like the P700, P900 or any of the larger printers. They tend to have more subtle variation of media settings. If you want to print on an art paper here, you've got one setting, that's the Velvet Fine Art, the VFA setting. The matte setting will work on some papers as well. So if you're testing a third-party paper and you're unsure what it is, try the VFA setting and the matte setting. They change as to ink usage. So the VFA setting, Velvet Fine Art, is the one that uses a mix of pigment ink and dye-based ink with the mix. So it uses all the inks. The Epson matte doesn't, as far as I can tell, because Epson don't publish this information, doesn't use the pigment black. Now, the results you get from this, I've tried lots of different papers. As I say, there's a full list in the review of all the ones I've tried. And what I've discovered is that for colour, it's all about the profiling. I haven't found a good quality paper that, with a good profile, didn't give acceptable results on this printer. Now, results vary because different images have different ranges of colour. They have different brightnesses. There are high key, low key images, different styles of image like that. So it's about matching your style of image to the paper. So if you go for photo papers, any of the Epson photo papers, they work well. If you go for a metallic paper, and I've tested some metallic papers on other printers, and briefly on this one as well. Some of the bright colour prints you can get from metallic pros with these dye inks really are impressive, and they work well, once again with the proper profiles on it. If you haven't got the profiles, then it's a gamble. You may get passable results, you may not. It all comes down to that. With matte art papers, it depends what you want to print. Now, here is, I mentioned earlier, two papers that I looked at. This is a Hahnemuhle paper. It's a really nice art cotton rag paper. I've used it for years. Relatively light, 265 grams, so it's relatively light, but gives excellent, this is the profiling chart for it, and it gives really nice colours. This is Epson Hot Press Bright. This is one of Epson's art papers. Now, they do change the names of these somewhat. They have been under a number of different names over the years, but they're the same basic paper. This is a smooth finish cotton rag art paper. Really nice paper. I use it quite a lot for certain types of black and white images. There's the hot press natural as well, which is a similar surface to this but less bright, and I like that more for architectural images of older subjects. The warmth of the paper comes through a bit more. This is quite bright. It's about matching what you want to print with the kind of image, how you want it to look with what the paper can manage. Now, so there we have two profiling sheets. Now, I have processed these and both made good profiles. There's nothing wrong with the printing of them. But the colours in the Hahnemuhle paper here are much brighter than they are here on the Epson one. Does that mean the Epson one is worse than the other? No, it does not. And I've looked at this elsewhere in a video about making fine art prints, and I've covered some aspects of this. Here are two prints of Curve in Leicester, printed. This is on the Hot Press Bright, this is on the Hahnemuhle paper. Now, the Hahnemuhle paper has got more intense colours. That may suit this image better than the more muted colours I get on the Hot Press Bright. However, there's fine detail here in these coloured areas. They are two distinctly different prints made on what I would have said before testing this printer were essentially the same sorts of paper. Now, that's the biggest difference I've seen. So you think, okay, we've got that. What about when I try this with the ABW mode? Well, it turns out that if I use the ABW mode, VFA setting, if I use that on this Hot Press Bright paper, these are both cotton rag papers, if I use that on this, I get really nice black and white results. And in particular, this is on a very similar paper to this. It's a slightly warmer paper. Also, this one is a slightly warmer paper, printed using ABW, but they are this sort of paper. Now, when I use the ABW mode on the Hahnemuhle paper, and I've got some really nice black and white prints I've produced over the years on this exact paper, they looked awful. Blacks are all crunched up, they had a sort of greenish tinge to them in places. All visible if I use the test print to start with. Now, I've got my black and white test image, and I've got it around here, and I would say if you're going to print black and white, print this using the ABW mode first to test whether your particular paper is good or horrible with black and white. And it really can be that obvious a difference. It can look really bad on it. Now, that's not a fault of this. That's merely saying that you have to be careful in selecting which papers you need. Now, I have obviously tested quite a lot of papers, and they'll be listed in the review. And I am not recommending any papers in particular. There are so many papers, and remember, I'm in the UK, so I only have a range of papers that are available here in the UK. So I've tested papers from PhotoSpeed, from Permajet and my local paper supplier, Paper Spectrum. I've had great results from all of them with profiling. So the key, I would say, to this is whatever papers you have in your market where you are, get some sample packs and test that you can get profiles for them, because without good profiles you're not going to get good results from this. I've been really pleased at the quality of prints I've been able to get out of this printer. They've been really good, but I've had to put some care into it. And if there was one takeaway from this, I'd say, is that if you have another printer that you've used and you have a favourite paper from that printer, be careful about assuming that it's always automatically going to work in this printer here. You need to allow for the fact that this has a very distinct, different ink set. It's not pigment, it's not dye, it's a hybrid between the two, or I should say with some papers it's a hybrid between the two as to how it goes. So yes, you can get great results from it, I like it, but be careful. And if somebody who uses another printer says to you, yes, you should use such and such paper, it's the best, or on a forum somewhere you see a paper recommended, take such advice with care. But anyway, that's the printer. Hope you found this of use. Please feel free to ask questions. My feeling is that this is an interesting direction to take for printing. Thanks to Epson UK for lending it to me along with ink. And I'm sure Karen, my wife, will be glad when I finish printer testing for a while and all the piles of prints can be put away somewhere. But yeah, this is a nice printer if you want to print a bit more volume of prints and you're worried about ink costs. You do need to do quite a few prints though before the ink costs here and the overall price of the printer matches up with a smaller one. So well worth considering, and an interesting printer to test. Thanks.